How do we learn to live together? Throughout time, people have sought to understand this question as they work to understand, empathize with, and relate to other people. At the beginning of this course, I reflected that learning to live together means having mutual respect and working to understand the values of others around you. While I still believe this to be true, in the past couple of months, I have learned how to live together in the context of reconciliation, where it's important to work towards healing, justice, and a shared future. Meet Anishinaabe activist Murray Sinclair, an inspiring senator, lawyer, and leader who co-created and chaired the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He was raised by his Cree grandfather and his Ojibwe grandmother, who were both required to go through the residential school system. As the chair of the TRC for 6 years, he personally heard the stories of around 5,000 other residential school survivors. Although Sinclair died recently, his legacy lives on as he inspired others to continue to work towards justice and healing through education. He is known for saying, "Education got us into this mess, and education will get us out." The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada was created with the intention of guiding Canadians through the discovery of the facts behind the residential school system, as well as to lay the foundation for lasting reconciliation across Canada. Over 4,000 students died while attending residential school, and the TRC found that a high rate of these deaths were from violence, illness, and malnutrition. In 2021, when radar searches uncovered over 1,000 unmarked graves at the site of former residential schools, it brought new attention to the harsh conditions that these Indigenous children faced. When I was in grade 8 and these revelations began to surface, I remember many of the people around me being shocked. As Cree Chief Wilton Littlechild said, it was because the story was hidden that people didn't know about it. It took sort of a real shock and awakening of the country. He reflected that before these graves were found, there was always that level of denial that, no, it couldn't have happened in Canada. TRC Call to Action number 80 states, "We call upon the federal government, in collaboration with Aboriginal peoples, to establish as a statutory holiday a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation to honor survivors, their families, and communities, and ensure that public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process." Call to Action number 80 connects to the treaty responsibility of mutual respect as it emphasizes recognizing the histories of Indigenous people, as well as including them in decision-making processes in a way that will respect and value their perspectives. Murray Sinclair's commitment to the creation of the TRC report was a vital part of recognizing these Indigenous histories, as he amplified the voices of hundreds of Indigenous survivors and called upon the government to implement public commemoration of the legacy of residential schools. One of the ways Murray Sinclair's work towards Call to Action number 80 has been implemented is through the renaming of public monuments. Renaming will certainly not solve all of our problems, but commemoration, Section 79 to 83 of the TRC, is an important step towards reconciliation. An example of this I've seen in my own community is when my sister's school was recently named to Genetsgray in 2022. The school was previously named after Ryerson, who was an advocate for the creation of the residential school system. The name Genetsgray means by the bay, and it was chosen through an Indigenous-informed process that combined student choice with consultation with local Indigenous communities. My sister reflected that it was meaningful to be a part of a school that recognized the harmful effects of residential schools and worked with Indigenous people to find a new name. Canada has made important changes in regards to public commemoration of Indigenous history and contributions. While these actions are meaningful, there's still work to be done to address the ongoing impacts of colonialism, both through policy and in individual communities. Exploring Indigenous voices is a crucial part of commemorating Indigenous history. One of the concrete actions that can be taken both within families and school communities is to include Indigenous stories into children's storytime. For older students, inviting survivors of residential schools to be guest speakers and share their stories. Individually, people can explore Indigenous voices through media consumption by exploring Indigenous literature, podcasts, TV shows, and content creators. People in communities across Canada can commemorate the history of residential schools by participating in local activities that allow them to engage with Indigenous people. Throughout this course, I have discovered how we learn to live together through stories, education, and qualities like honor and trust. I have gained so much knowledge about connecting with the land and how nature can relate to reconciliation. Above all, I have learned that in order to reconcile, Canadians must remember and acknowledge historical injustices against Indigenous people. Murray Sinclair made a powerful statement that summarizes this notion. We must never forget, because this is a part of who we are. Not just who we are as survivors and children of survivors, but who we are as a nation. And this nation must never forget what it once did to its most vulnerable people.